And in fact, the word Seminole is not even an Indian word. It is derived from a Spanish word, cimarron, meaning runaway slave. And so from the beginning, you don't have an Indian tribe. It was a multi-ethnic coalition.
Historical evidence documents their close relationship. Blacks became chiefs, signed treaties, and served on the tribal council. They intermarried. They were equals, Opala says, and the Indians depended on them as warriors and interpreters. Now, nearly 200 years later, comes the $56 million payment from the federal government to compensate the tribe for those lost Florida lands. But the Black Seminoles can't share in it because the government and the tribe say they were slaves of the Red Seminoles back then. Joe Opala, who has worked to preserve their legacy, says that's wrong.
The Black Seminoles fought side by side, died, bled for those lands in Florida.
Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahushai, all the praises, all the honor, all the glory be unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. As always, double honors to our apostles and elders at Great Millstone that taught us His truth and who are ruling well through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahushai. Shalom, peace and love to you, Akim, that are prophets and teachers who are hazarding your lives to push the true wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of the scriptures, helping to edify the elect of the nation of Israel. Shalom, peace and love also to you believers, you Akim, you few Akwatim, and children that are listening and learning. The inspiration of this lesson is brought to you by way of a video that I seen, which is a short video dealing with the hidden history of the so-called, these so-called African and Black Seminoles, in which we're not African. Our brothers are not African. You know, our brothers are Israelites that were taken from Africa, that had fled there. They're actually from the tribe of Judah. The so-called North American Negro is from the tribe of Judah. And they will come to be known, some of them that is, that fled slavery or that were freed, and went to live amongst the Seminole Nation, within Florida. They will become to known as Black Seminoles, which was two tribes of Israel that were coming together. One is known as the tribe of Judah, and they're the so-called Africans or so-called slaves of North America. And you have the Seminoles, which the Seminoles cover a variety of different tribes. Just to put that out there, but the most commonly known is the Creek. The Creek, in which they're the tribe of Reuben, which is also known in the scriptures as the excellency of dignity. And you can see an example of their dignity in so much that they were one of the so-called Native American tribes, but really they're a separate tribe, which you have Gad and you have Reuben. But Reuben would be the Seminoles. They were less likely or less prone to enslave, so-called Negroes or blacks or slaves that were escaping Esau, Edom, and seeking refuge, or seeking, what would you call that? Asylum, amongst them. They would accept them into, their nation, and they will begin to fight side by side with them, against Esau, Edom, becoming a formidable force, to Esau, Edom, which is the self-proclaimed white man, which they didn't become white until the 1600s, in which they created that class of people, also creating the class which will be known as blacks. But before then, which I get this from Apostle Gabar, in order to tell a lie, they have to know the truth. So they knew exactly who these people were that they were coming up against, from the tribe of Judah, all right, all the way up into Gad and Reuben. They knew exactly who they were. Now, it brings to remembrance a book called The Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, in which within this book, which was written by the author by the name of Dr. Joy DeGruy. And I don't have the book anymore because, I gave it to a brother. However, I was able to find the PDF version of this book. Now, Esau was so scared that they introduced something known as exclusionary laws, or black exclusion laws, all right, which were laws that tried to separate what they would call the Indians and black. So they also passed anti-miscegenation laws, as well as black exclusion laws, as well as black codes, as well as vagrancy laws, all right, during the era of Jim Crow, or after they eased up on putting yokes of iron on us. All right, during slavery, you had slave codes and things of that nature. But after, they eased up on putting the irons, or the yokes of iron upon our necks. All right, that's when you see a bunch of, or flurry of different codes, and laws that were passed pretty much to prohibit us. Now, an anti-miscegenation law is a law that stops the intermarrying of two different races, or what they would call two different races. And the reason that they passed the anti-miscegenation law in the regards of Judah and Reuben was because they were afraid. One, because of the things that they have done unto both nations. All right, beginning in the 1400s, all right, when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, all right, in which they were using, dogs, to tear the flesh, and rip open, the Israelites that were over here of the northern kingdom of Israel. All right, they were killing abundantly people that were at peace with them, people that welcomed them. All right, yes, this is the history of Christopher Columbus. And a lot of that history is recorded by an author named Bartolome de las Casas, all right, in the book known as The Destruction of the Indies. All right, they were ripping over women that were pregnant, dashing their children against the stones. They were hanging men and women from the gallows, and they liked to hang them by the number 13, through their blasphemous, Catholicism beliefs combined with their wicked ass behavior, all right, to honor, all right, Yahushua and the 12 apostles. And in the future, they would oppress the tribe of Judah. All right, they will oppress the tribe of Benjamin and Levi as well. So they were afraid of these two nations that were vindictive, that had a vendetta against them, of uniting and coming together, in which in the case of the so-called North American Negro, all right, and the so-called Seminole Indians, which is Judah and Reuben coming together, they formed a force to combat the United States and the United States military. And they were also slaying and destroying our towns and villages, which included men, women, and children. So they said that Judah, because they were slaves amongst, they were slaves, in the houses of these Edomites, they became accustomed to their way of life and their language. The tribe of Reuben being a fearsome, that basically them two coming together, would form a force that will basically destroy them. Now, the history that I'm going to read comes from a man named Samuel Thurston, all right, which was a delegate to the United States Congress, all right, through the state of Oregon, all right, which you can look up black exclusion laws or black exclusionary laws, and it will bring up something dealing with the nation of Oregon, all right, in which they didn't want any of the tribe of Judah living amongst them at all for this particular fear. All right, and a lot of times they'll use, we don't want white women to be raped, so this is the reason why. But really, it was because they feared retribution or retaliation for all of the heinous and wicked things that they did into our people. So I'm going to read a little bit of this. Article 1, Section 35, no free Negro or mulatto not residing in the states at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall come reside or be within this state or hold any real estate or make any contracts or maintain any suit therein. And legislative assembly shall provide by penal laws for the removal by public officers of all such Negroes and mulattoes, and for their effectual exclusion from the state, and for the punishment of persons who shall bring them into the state or employ or harbor them. Article 11, Section 6, no Negro, Chinaman, or mulatto shall have the right of suffrage. One justification for the exclusionary laws was a fear by whites that blacks would intermarry with Indians and form an undefeatable army that will annihilate them. This was a commonly held belief during the period and was expressed frequently by politicians. Samuel Thurston was a delegate to the United States Congress from the Oregon Territory, speaking before Congress in 1850 in defense of his territory exclusionary acts. He argued the following: the Negroes associated with the Indians and intermarry, and in their free ingress is encouraged or allowed. The Negroes associate with the Indians and intermarry, and if their free ingress is encouraged or allowed, they would a relationship spring up between them and the different tribes, and a mixed race would ensue inimical to the whites, and the Indians being led by the Negroes, who was better acquainted with the customs, language, and manners of the whites. Then the Indians, these savages, would become much more formidable than they otherwise would. And long and bloody wars will be the fruit of the commingling of the races. All right, so this was their reason, all right, of basically excluding, all right, Jakes from being able to own land within the territory of Oregon and many other places. All right, but ultimately you can hear the fear within what was said by Samuel Thurston, because he feared that they would retaliate. So the book of Proverbs 1:31, therefore shall they eat the fruit of their own way and be filled with their own devices, because the time is going to come when these two nations, the northern and the southern kingdom of Israel, will become one. One of the things that you fear is actually going to take place. You know, there are many things that the Edomites fear. All right, beginning with the top rich elite banking families, they fear and dread losing their position that they have over the earth. They fear and dread being in poverty. They fear and dread losing their riches. They fear and dread losing their control, art, and domination over the planet Earth. And you're going to lose that to the very same people that you hate, which are the Israelites. Now, leaving from there, and I want to go here and read a little bit of something about Samuel, which is, his name is Samuel Royal Thurston, all right, or Royal Thurston. Was an American pioneer, lawyer, and politician. He was the first delegate from the Oregon Territory to the United States Congress and was instrumental in the passage of the Donation Land Claim Act. And if I'm not mistaken, it mentions something within his biography. It is a question, and this is coming from Wikipedia. It is a question of life or death to us in Oregon. The Negroes associate with the Indians and intermarry, and if their free ingress is encouraged or allowed, they would a relationship spring up between them and the different tribes, and a mixed race would ensue amicable to the whites, or amicable to the whites, and the Indians being led on by the Negro, who is better acquainted with the customs, language, and manners of the whites than the Indians. These savages will become much more formidable than they otherwise would, and long bloody wars will be the fruit of the commingling of the race. It is a principle of self-preservation that justifies the actions of the Oregon legislation. And when you go into the word self-preservation is basically doing what it takes to preserve your race from being destroyed. So this is the reason why all of these different laws and codes and things were passed by Esau Edom to pretty much try to hinder the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. It was really to hinder them, because Esau knew eventually, in all their belief, in manifest destiny, they knew that eventually they would become victims of their own devices, and that they would lose their position. All right, so they use all of their wickedness. All right, what does it say? That they speak evil concerning oppression. All right, they use all of their power and might to pretty much stifle and hold back the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American. But just as the pressure builds up, within the tank, and eventually the lid pops off, or as much as you put helium or air inside of a balloon, you can only put it in there so much to the point that it eventually pops. All right, so eventually this thing will pop. All right, and Judah is going to rise up like a lion. All right, because until this day, you're still harassing and you're still oppressing the children of Israel. Now, that makes America similar to Egypt, because when you go into the book of Exodus 1:9, it says this concerning Pharaoh, in the children of Egypt. He said to his people, look, and this comes from the NLT, the people of Israel now outnumber us and are stronger than we are. We must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. So doesn't this sound like the same thing that was happening, back then and now? All right, so basically their plan was to oppress the children of Israel in the land of Egypt to stop them from growing more. And that's the same energy that Esau Edom came in with our people here that were being oppressed, which are the Israelites today. If we don't, and if war breaks out, they would join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country. So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with crushing labor. All right, they forced them to build the cities of Pithom and Ramesses as supply centers for the king. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more the Israelites multiplied and spread, and the more alarmed the Egyptians became. So the Egyptians worked the people of Israel without mercy. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar and brick and do all the work in the fields. They were ruthless in all their demands. So this is the same energy that Esau Edom came in within this place. And this is the reason why in the scriptures, America is known as the house of bondage, or spiritually known as Egypt. All right, even to this day. So now going from here to, all right, this information that I got from a website called johnhorse.com. It says struggling for survival on three frontiers, the Southeast in 1812 and 1838, the West in 1838 through 1850, and the Southwest in 1850 through 1880s. The Black Seminoles were like a shadow soul of the expanding American empire. Politically and historically, the country did not want to recognize its shadow. As a group, the rebels raised uncomfortable ideas, the threat of slave revolts, the nightmare of Indians and blacks uniting. So see, this was something that they were afraid of. Two nations that they oppressed and that they fucked over, coming together and uniting, to become one. All right, in which they waged some very good wars, in so much that the war tactics that they were using, the United States military still use them until today. All right, different vehicles within the United States military are named after Native Americans until this day. All right, the war tactics, of painting the face, the guerrilla warfare, all of that was learned from the Native American enemies, Native American Indians, so-called Native American Indians. All right, even their martial arts skills, all right, were developed from, so-called Native American Indians. The contradiction of American freedom founded on the backs of African slaves, and so the national consciousness suppressed nearly all memory of the Black Seminoles through ideological trends, censorship, and even legal measures. So when it comes down to these revolts and this great resistance that was led by so-called blacks or so-called Black Seminoles and so-called Seminoles, which were the tribe of Judah, all right, and the tribe of Reuben, this information gets suppressed and it doesn't get put out there, all right, because this isn't any knowledge that they want really to be out there. All right, this is something that they fear and dread, as well as they don't want you to know pretty much the success that they were having. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, all right, it failed because biblical prophecy, all right, has to take place. But at the end of the day, the very same thing that you fear and dread is going to be what happens in your future. All right, and we're going to get that in the scriptures. Now, it says briefly, prominent during the rise of the abolitionist movement in 1836 through 1863, the group quickly faded from mainstream awareness. By the 1900s, they were a mere footnote, art in history. Now, there is another art. There was something else in here which ultimately dealt with the United States getting the land from Florida. And let me see if I can find that. Baba Kushai. Bear with your boy. All right, because that's also in the scriptures as well. I'll read this while I'm looking for. Free blacks were first reported living with Indians in Florida in the early 1700s. Very little is known about these early black pioneers, except they were most likely fugitives from the Carolinas who sought freedom on Spanish soil by taking the wilderness. They contributed to an age-old tradition in the New World. So yeah, they fled to Florida because Florida was owned by the Spanish, but eventually they and they gave the history on this. I'm a little upset that I can't find it. All right, because they even gave the name. They even gave the name of the particular agreement that was held through the American and the Spanish, because eventually America bought the land of Florida from the Spanish. All right, and that's also within biblical prophecy, which I'll grab that as well. Man, I'm a little upset. Let's see if I can do this. All right, let's go to introduction. And I'll find it. Bear with me, Baba Kusha. And if I don't find it, what I'll do is I'll still go ahead and grab the precept, all right, dealing with how, the little horn would subdue the three kings, because that's within biblical prophecy. Wow, I can't find it, which I saw it earlier, but nonetheless, it tells you in the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, all right, that the little horn, which represents, all right, the 13 colonies, all right, that broke off, all right, from Great Britain. Basically, the 13 colonies started off small, but they would eventually take over the whole United States of America, subduing the French, all right, the British and the Spanish. All right, which you have the Spanish-American Wars that took place. Now, this is something that the scriptures actually speak about. In the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, and I'll start around the 23rd verse. It says, "Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which was the holy, not the holy, but the Roman Empire, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of the kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and that another that shall rise after them, all right, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings, in which you will have, America that would eventually be formed, starting with the 13 colonies, which will eventually subdue the French, the British, and the Spanish. All right, to eventually grow into what we know now today as North America. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until the time and the dividing of times. All right, so what you did in this place was you wore out the saints of the Most High. But now, eventually, you're going to be paid back for that. All right, the very same thing that you fear and dread is going to be what is used to help take you down. But ultimately, it's going to be Yahweh Shai that takes you down. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his kingdom to consume and to destroy it unto the end, because these nations are going to come together. And these nations like Russia, Iran, that have intercontinental ballistic missiles, the Heavenly Father is going to use them as well to help destroy you. But then you're going to have Yahweh Shai that comes in the chariots. All right, and on the inside, All right, you're going to have Jake that eventually get roused up. All right, as it states within the book of Genesis. Now, a little bit more history, and then I'll get some closing scriptures. This comes from Britannica. It says the Seminoles were largely of Creek origin and lived in villages in northern Florida. The area was also home to a number of free African Americans, which are the tribe of Judah. All right, the tribe of Judah, the so-called Africans or African Americans are the tribe of Judah. The runaway African American slaves, all of whom were known as Black Seminoles, the Seminoles, which is the tribe of Reuben, and Black Seminoles, which is the tribe of Judah, were aligned with the British against the Americans before and during the War of 1812. And actually, this is where I believe it mentions about, the territory of Florida being purchased by America. I think it mentions it here. The Americans before and during the War of 1812 were the targets of frequent raids by militias from Georgia who sought runaway slaves as well as land and cattle. In 1816, the United States soldiers destroyed a garrison that was a refuge for escaped slaves, killing some 270 people. The Seminoles subsequently began raiding American settlements along the Georgia-Florida border, and what many writers identify as the beginning of the First Seminole War. In November 1817, U.S. soldiers attacked the Seminole village of Fowltown near present-day Bainbridge, Georgia, and the battle ensued. In relations, a group of Seminoles laid siege to a boat carrying reinforcements to Fort Scott on the Apalachicola River and killed 43 men, women, and children. In December 1817, the U.S. General Andrew Jackson, which was given the title the Indian Killer, for his hatred, of Native Americans and Seminole Indians, he was given the name the Indian Killer, was given command. And in any other time, if our people were in good standing with Yahweh, and wasn't under the curses of Deuteronomy 28, this would have never taken place. Esau, Edom would have been destroyed. But this had to happen for biblical prophecy's sake. America would eventually have to become America. At this present time, when this was happening, they were just the 13 colonies. But eventually they had to grow. But the Heavenly Father didn't just give it to them easily. Now, however, through all of the wickedness and things that they did to grow into the nation that they are today, all of the oppression and blood that was spilled of our people, you got to answer for that. So once again, it says in December 1817, U.S. General Andrew Jackson was given command of the U.S. forces in the area. In the following spring, he led troops against Seminole villages on Lake Makasuki and along the Suwannee River, destroying them as he went. In addition, he seized the Spanish military post at what is now St. Mark's and then proceeded to take the Spanish-held town of Pensacola. Jackson's military success paved way for the Spain's agreement to relinquish its territory to Florida and the United States under the terms of the 1819 Transcontinental Treaty. So that's what I was looking for earlier, which it wasn't on the other website. It was on this one. But this is recorded within the book of Daniel. All right. Let me jump back up and read this aspect. This is Daniel 7:9. I beheld till the thrones were cast down and the Ancient of Days did sit. Let me see. Actually, Daniel 7 and 8. And I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them a little horn, before whom three of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. And the reason it says a little horn, because America started off with 13 colonies. It started off small, but eventually it was subdued the French, the British, and the Spanish. All right, and it subdued the Spanish, all right, through the Transcontinental Treaty. But interwoven within that history, all right, is the rebellion, or what is known as a slave rebellion, all right, of the so-called freed slaves or black Seminoles that were fighting side by side with the Seminoles, all right, to come up against the United States military in the United States. But however, the Spanish eventually sold their land, or that particular land of Florida, to the United States under the Transcontinental Treaty. But this is spoken about within Daniel 7 and 7. All right. One of the horns that were plucked up was the Spanish. So now that I've mentioned that, let me read these two last closing scriptures. The book of Ezekiel 25 and 12. And this is coming from the NLT. This is what the sovereign Lord says. The people of Edom have sinned greatly by avenging themselves against the people of Judah. Therefore, says the sovereign Lord, whose name is Yahweh, I will raise my fist of judgment against Edom. I will wipe out its people and animals with the sword. I will make a wasteland of everything from Teman to Dedan. I will accomplish this by the hand of my people Israel. They will carry out my vengeance with anger, and Edom will know that this vengeance is from me. I, the sovereign Lord, or I, the sovereign Yahweh, have spoken it. So the day is going to come when our people will be filled with the anger of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai. All right, and will come up against Esau, Edom. The book of Zechariah 9 and 11. As for thee also, by the blood of thy covenant, I have sent forth the prisoners out of the pit wherein is no water. Turn ye to the stronghold, ye prisoners of hope. Even today I declare that I will render double unto thee. When I have bent Judah for me and filled the bowl with Ephraim. Judah represents the southern kingdom of Israel. Ephraim represents the northern kingdom. And raise up thy sons, O Zion, against thy sons, O Greece, and made thee as a sword of a mighty man. So the time is going to come when Israel is going to get at you devils. They're going to fuck you up. And there's no other way to put it. And the very same thing that you fear is going to happen. Because the scriptures say, he that roll a stone, it shall be rolled back upon him. And he that casts, a stone on high, all right, it shall come back down upon him. All right, it's going to come back down upon your head. All of your ill doings and all of your wickedness. So with that, I truly hope that this lesson was edifying. All praises, all honor, all glory be unto Yahweh. Bahashem Yahweh Shai, double honors to our apostles and elders at Great Millstone. Peace and love, salutations, and mercy be unto the hopeful elect. Shalom and abad, babal, kwam bakiyam. Shalom.